Too much what?
All right, and we are too much of a lag.
Oh, okay.
We are live, guys. What's going on, Bobby and Amin?
Chris,
Hey,
how's it
Chris.
What are you
going?
guys? What are you guys wearing tonight?
You first, Amin.
Good,
because
good.
of the topic today, put on a Zelos hammerhead with a ETA 2892 movement.
Nice. What about you, Bobby?
And I guess in spirit of today's conversation, I'm wearing my new Gino, which has a 7750 value, which we know ETA has bought out
Nice.
value a while now, right? I mean, it's been a while since they've had that movement.
I'm wearing my Seamaster, which of course has the modified ETA movement by Omega. So
Awesome.
Being part of the Swatch group. So we got Tennessee Mike on here. We got Clyde the Watch Wrangler, Nilo, Joe. What's going on? You Winding Watches and Mike. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining in, guys. But basically tonight's topic is we're going to talk about ETA versus Selita movement. Is better and why we think it's better, or do we think either one is better? I kind of take a kind of neutral stance on that because I used to think that ETA was better than Selita. I think that's just like a lot of forum thought talk, I guess. Like you see so many different forum topics on that, like Watch You Seek or Facebook forums or whatever else. And since I've had more experience with it through the Zen, of course, has a modified Selita, then the Maurice Lacroix had a modified Selita, and they actually pretty accurate depending on the company that actually regulates and modifies it. So I kind of go kind of neutral on that. What's your guys' take on ETA versus Selita?
Amin, you first.
Yeah, so I feel similar to that. I mean, every once in a while I hear somebody say that one is better than the other. Usually people say they're about the same, and if someone says one's better, it's usually ETA. Although occasionally someone will point out that the Selita, has an extra jewel, or that they tried to improve the shape of the gear teeth. But I've had watches with both now, and I think my experience has been they've all been reliable, they've all worked well, and how accurate they are comes down to how well they're regulated. And they, the ones that I've had have been highly accurate, in both camps. I had a Bell and Ross with a Selita. It was, well regulated, highly accurate. I've had, numerous ETA movements, same thing. I've never had an ETA or a Selita crap out on me. It's never happened. So at least my personal experience is that they're both good movements.
Now, Rob, the one thing I have heard, the misjudgment, on the watchmakers a little harder to service than ETA. Well, I don't know whether that's true or not. But go ahead, Bobby. What were you?
Yeah, I've seen that on the forums too. That that watchmakers there are some more issues that they have had encountered with Selitas as opposed to ETAs. Now, I have a natural leaning towards ETA just because of reputation and because of longevity. And I've talked about this a lot with fellow watch enthusiasts. I can't really figure out why I prefer. There's probably not too much. It's not based on much reasoning. I just do. However, and doing some research on Selita for a while now, because a lot of the watches that I like will house Selita, especially for example, Zen, right? So Zen, was using mostly ETAs, and then ETAs have been choked out by the Swatch group, and it's making it more difficult for other brands who are outside of the Swatch group to obtain them and use them, or at least more expensive, right? And so brands like Zen, Micros, right? They're going towards Selita, if not Myota or whatever, but they're going towards Selita because of the availability. So I get that. So in doing some research in the last like year or so, because I wanted to be reassured or feel better about buying a watch that or a model from a brand that used to sell it with one movement and then now is selling it with another. I found that in several places. Now I don't know how how accurate this is, or if there's any truth in this, and the only way we would know is if maybe if we had like a watchmaker or somebody from ETA or somebody from Selita, talk about it. But with some of those movements, it's actually not Selita. It's actually less to make uh, a movement, right? Like your SW200 is cheaper to make. I'm not saying that it's cheap, that it's cheaper to make, or the SW500 is cheaper to make than a 7750 or like a 2824. Now, if that's the case, right? And I don't have the information that is the proof, but it's only been hearsay. If that's the case, then I would expect that some of these watches, right? Of course, this is an expectation, it's an unreal expectation, to be, well, if you had an ETA and now you have a Selita, well, I want to see the little price difference on the watch. Now, that is not on Selita, right? It's on these brands, but by default, it is kind of on Selita. So now I don't want to pay the same amount I would have paid for a watch that had an ETA. And now a lot of these companies like Zinn is raising their prices and using Solitas. So that's where it lays with me. You know what I mean? That's why I'm torn. So at the end of the day, if I really like the watch, I don't think I'm gonna care. Like if I really wanted the 104 Zinn 104, for example, and that has a Selita SW50, and you actually lent yours in to me, Chris, that's a great watch. And Amin's right. If it's regulated the right way by the brand, it's not a deal breaker for me, but it does cause me some pause.
Chris talked about servicing costs. I mean, people, the Selita, the main movements, the SW200, 300, 500, although they're clones of ETA movements, they don't use the same parts, right? Or at least they don't use all interchangeable parts. So I wonder if part of the serviceability is just that, and it's just a question, but if watchmakers are used to having more ETA parts on hand or not.
I think there's some truth to that. And some of the forums that I've read, some of the watchmakers have said that ETA parts are much easily attainable than Selita at this moment, or whatever that post was made, maybe like a year or two ago. I saw a couple of them.
Which could change, right?
Yeah.
Especially if Swatch is making ETA, less accessible over time. That's interesting. But Rob, I guess the question is, so if they're cheaper to make, why is that, right? Is that, I guess the question is, are you sure? And then how do you, and then why would it be, right? If it's equally good, then I don't care if it's cheaper to make if it's equally good, I guess is my point there. I have a slight bias towards ETA because it came first, right? I mean, the only reason Selita is allowed to keep making these is because the the copyright expired, or patents expired, or whatever it may be that allows them to
Nilo
make
actually brought a good point. Nilo was saying that ETA seems to hold better value. I guess ETA is more popular amongst enthusiasts like ourselves. You think that's why it holds better value than Selita, or do you think like watches with ETA that's now going to be discontinued? Do you think they're going to go shoot up in value a little bit because of that?
I don't know how much it's going to shoot up in value. I mean, I think there might be some truth to that. These ETAs holding watches with ETAs holding value. But to get back to what Amin was saying, now, if it's cheaper to make the Selita, but it's just as good as the ETA, that's fine. I guess then I have a gripe with the brands who are charging the same or more for the watch if they're not doing much. If they're not doing anything extra with the watch, it's the same watch except for they're swapping out movements. But then again, like I said before, I mean, that may not be a huge deal breaker for me, but it's still in the back of my mind. It's still there.
Yeah.
Now, is it correct? Now, of course, I don't claim to know everything or anything like that. Is it correct that Seagull is a direct copy of ETA also? The Chinese Seagull movement?
Well, the chronograph, wasn't the chronograph a copy of? Didn't they buy the machines that made some other chrono, Swiss chrono, like 50 or 60 years ago, and then they just brought it over to China? I don't think it's ETA, but I think it starts something with a V. The movement
It's one of the Valjoux movements, which is now ETA. No, am I? Oh, Venus. It's one of the Venus movements.
Yeah,
that's right. Venus. Yeah.
Seagull ST19
yeah, that's
is
the chrono. That's
175.
Yeah,
that's right.
Clyde said the Seagull was the Venus movement made under license from 1960. That's what Clyde was saying.
I do, ETA definitely.
Mike is saying, isn't that a clone?
That I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't know. I'm not sure.
But like Colin said, I think a lot of people feel the way Colin does, and that ETA has more brand recognition still, right? So there's a lot of people who feel that way, and when you go to sell a watch, it probably helps to say ETA versus Selita.
Right.
But have any of you noticed a difference in performance? Because that I have not. I've had some of each.
I mean, honestly, I haven't. Like I said, the Maurice Lacroix I had was regulated by them. It was Selita, and then my Zen, of course, is Selita modified by Zen. And knock on wood, it seems to be keeping. I don't have a time graph or anything, but it seems to be keeping pretty accurate time.
Yeah,
I'm not about the time. As long as it's close. I'm not like one of those ones that has to be like 0 for 0 or plus where. As long as it's somewhat fairly accurate.
Right. I mean, I haven't to answer your question, and I have never owned a watch with a Selita movement, and it's because of how some of the people on the comment section are saying is ETA was first. I have a bias, like you said, towards ETA, whether it's valid or not, whether the reasoning behind that I gave you guys earlier is valid or not. It's just it is a bias, and so I kind of if I have the option of picking, for example, so this Guino, right? So they on the site they gave you the split. They said it's either going to be coming with a Valjoux 7750 or the SW500. They were being very transparent about it, right? Which I appreciate. Zin also does the same as well when with some of their models. And I emailed them, and I asked them, will this come with a 7750? Because that's my preference. And they told me, and maybe this is part of their little way to get me to go ahead with it. They were saying that we'll have the Valjoux probably last us another couple of weeks before we move over to Selita. And so that's when I went forward.
And that's nice. That's where like companies like Steinhardt, they're not really that transparent because it says either Selita, or ETA. You're not going to know which one you get until you order it, and then you open the case back.
I think they actually are being as transparent as they can be because they don't know when that switchover comes. When they do mail you the watch, so when I had that regulator that I bought from Steinhardt, and I knew it was going to come with a 6498, there was no issue, but there was a piece of paper, and it looked like a standard paper that Steinhardt sends with 4 or 5 movements, 6498, 2824, SW200, and whatever, and they have a check next to the one that the movement came with. So yeah, I mean, you find out the day you get the watch, but I think they're trying to be as transparent as they can. Now, with Guino, a smaller brand, I was able to email them and get an answer. I don't know if you'll be able to be that lucky. If that's something you want to find out from Steinhardt, they're a much bigger brand. They're not, Seiko big, but I don't know what their response time would be.
Some other brands rename the movement completely.
Right.
Don't tell you that it's an ETA 2824. And then when they start using Selita, they don't even change the name, and they still don't tell you.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah,
totally opaque.
that's a
Yeah,
different argument.
yeah,
You
but
know, at least with some of these brands that
right,
we're talking about, and your argument, and that's a valid argument too.
yeah,
That's not transparent. But like Chris brought up Steinhardt,
right,
and
right,
Steinhardt is
right.
being as transparent as they can
Yeah,
get. That's what my interpretation
I
is.
get it. Clive's point
Mhm.
is an interesting one, that Selita was a was a producer of ETA movements right before they um, in to start out
Mhm.
with, right? They were an outsourced
Mhm. Mhm.
assembler for ETA,
Mhm.
and so movements that were made by Selita before they became their own manufacturer were called ETA movements, right? They were, just like ETA
Yeah.
movements that were sent out to other places were called ETA
Yeah, and
Mhm.
then I
movements.
think when Etta made that, or Swatch made that decision to cut that relationship off, Selita, was in the process of self-preservation, and
Mm.
that's when they started building these clone movements.
Mhm.
Because I guess technically before they weren't
Okay.
clone, right?
You know, I was thinking about Nomos when they made their first quote unquote in-house movement. That was basically an ETA clone, right?
Hmm.
Their
Hmm.
very first one, and
Mhm.
they were like the darlings of the industry. Everybody, like, the Nomos clone of an ETA movement was like hailed as this amazing thing. But then when Selita clones an ETA movement, we're kind of all like, oh, that's not cool, not as good as ETA.
Yeah, and there is definitely a double
Mhm.
standard with a lot of brands, right?
Mm,
I think maybe the difference there, and is that Nomos, the watchmaker, did it themselves.
mm,
Now, if they would have gotten the Selita, right, a
mm.
clone of that, and put it in there, maybe that would be somewhat problematic, or they just wouldn't get the accolades, right?
Yeah,
But the fact that they
Mhm.
cloned an ETA and perhaps maybe put a little English to it, right, as an expression, or the
yeah,
little, did some modification to it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just, but we're not. Maybe it's just a slight step up. You know what I mean? I'm not going to give them. I'm not going to take out the pom poms.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
Definitely, this I feel like one of the best like buys right now in the hobby is the actual Hamilton with the ETA movement. For
Mm.
under what $400, you can't really beat that one. The
oh yeah, or you can go glycine with the combat sub, and then pay like around $300
True.
and get an ETA in it. You know?
Tissot also, I
True. I
mean,
didn't think about that
ETA,
one.
ETA movements are great within the Swatch group.
Yeah.
They're it's a great movement. So Clive,
Now with Tudor coming out, oh, go ahead.
Clive's saying there's 5 different levels of ETA movements,
Hmm.
but Selita also has levels, parallel levels to those ETA
Right.
levels. So I think we can still talk about them as one versus the other.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now with Tudor coming out with their in-house movements and they're starting to sell them, do you think that Swatch will release more ETA movements again, just to try and compete with Tudor still, or do you think Swatch is just going to hold it in-house?
I mean, I think why not? If I was Swatch, I'd hold it in house. I would just, you know what I mean, because that it would
Mhm.
only make. I mean, so you make it in house. They have plenty of brands within their umbrella using that movement.
Mhm.
I think they don't need to go out and sell outside of that. They don't need to do that, especially with
Yeah.
this, with a lot of the biases that people like me have towards them. I don't think they need to
Mhm.
do that. I mean, it is their in-house movement, right? And they don't have to do much more to it, right? They could still call it an in-house
Mhm.
movement. Hamilton could say that this is an in-house movement, right? And so, I don't know. That's my opinion, but I haven't really put too much thought into that. Whether they're going to release
Yeah.
more into the wild.
I
Yeah.
know there was some regulatory body that Swatch was, talking to that had a role in determining whether Swatch could could or couldn't do that. And I know those talks went into this year. I don't know what became of them. It's some sort of Swiss antitrust regulation.
Yeah, Design Atelier is saying he brought up a good point. He's saying Swatch margin isn't a cost and Rolex isn't a prestige. What do you think with them monopolizing the actual movement? Do you think they're going to raise like Omega here? Do you think they're going to raise prices of the Omega with the modified ETA movement, like the Hamiltons and all that? Do you think those will go up in price once they hold everything, keep everything within Swatch? You think that's going to cause a price hike in the watches?
I don't think so. I mean, it seems like prices are going up across the board already. Yeah, I don't think so. But you know, we'll see maybe some of their innovations being you know, not copied, right? Selita doesn't have a Powermatic 80, right? Copy. They don't have you know, some of what Swatch is doing.
No.
Who's that going to hurt?
That Clive is staying. Yeah. Probably ETA movements is really switch group competitors as much as it helps Selita. This is true. It'll probably help Selita more than anything, really.
Right.
They'll still be available for all of them. I noticed the Micro is starting to use Selita now.
Right, but I mean, again,
Selita,
again, I think it goes back to like there's some bias between a lot of watch enthusiasts towards the ETA movement, right? So yes, Selita's bottom line may get better, or Miyota, you know, whoever is going to compete, Eterna with their movement, in-house movement, that they're starting to sell off to some other brands, but you know, maybe it takes a while for that to happen, you know.
Yeah, I'm looking this up while we talk about it. That this regulatory agency, Comco, which is basically a federal body in Switzerland that oversees antitrust and competition issues, they made ETA continue to provide calibers to other, you know, companies until 2010, but there were talks over the past year about potentially stopping ETA from providing calibers to third parties. That from, you know, so that's the tricky part. I don't even know if ETA is allowed to make this decision or not.
And what's better, Miyota or Ray Liotta?
Well, Ray Liotta, Goodfellas days may have the edge.
Ray, can I share a screen here real quick?
Yeah, sure, man.
All right.
I should be able to. Let me.
I think if you just
here, I'll add you to.
It should show up at the bottom if you just click on it. You see the one I'm trying to share?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, actually, I gotta. I think I shared the wrong one. Let's do that one more time. Oh, we lose Rob?
Oh, he just disappeared there.
You see it there?
Yeah. Right. Sorry, Rob.
All right.
I accidentally hit. There we go.
Sorry.
There we go. Sorry, Bob.
Okay.
You can see Clive's face over my face anyway. So.
Technical difficulties.
Sorry. So this is the update that I just found. So this is from July, and Comco, this regulatory agency, lifted the ban on ETA, allowing it to continue to deliver to clients at its own discretion. Right. So basically, ETA gets to decide. It's been interesting because, you know, we've been hearing about them giving less and less, but some small companies still get them, right? And then others don't.
Yeah. That's odd because there was actually, I think Ross is going to lend me in a there's a Zenea is a new micro brand, and they're still using actual ediments. And I think they keep them like right in the $600-$700 price range.
Yeah.
Zealous is still using them.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess
So,
they
for
decide.
sure.
Yeah,
Cool.
wasn't Chris, you may know the answer to this, but wasn't Ivan from Iconic, wasn't he trying to source ETA movements or something? I thought I heard you
I
guys
think
talk
he
about it in a
was, and I
chat
think
once.
I think he had ended up
It's just
going
too
with
expensive.
Miota, I believe, correct?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm
Yeah.
just trying to remember that conversation. I think he said it was just too expensive. But it sounds like
Yeah.
they can be had, if you're willing to pay that premium. Now, it doesn't probably make sense for a micro to do that, right? Um, but
Mhm.
but maybe for some of these other bigger companies, brands, maybe it's not worth it,
Mhm.
or maybe it is worth it.
Yeah.
I
Maybe
just don't know how
make
many. I
like a
just don't.
Zelos or something like that.
Yeah, but let's like talk about like Zen, for example. Like, Zen. I mean, it seems like they're running out of the
Mm.
28, 24s,
Mm.
but their GMT, they have the 2893s. I think it's the 93. It's either 2893 or 2892. And so for like their A56 UTC, they're still selling it with that movement. Now,
Mhm.
maybe the UTC watch doesn't sell as much as a 104 does, of course. But then
Mhm.
you have like the 103s. The 103s are still showing Valjoux movements on them. But then you have the 356, and now the 358 moving over to SW 500s, and then the 903, the Navitimer one, is strictly all Selita 500s. So yeah, I mean, I just it's all over the place. Um, and I don't know. I mean, Damasco is still using, I think, ETAs, some of the German brands. I mean, maybe there's easily,
Mm.
maybe because their proximity to Switzerland, they don't have to, or wherever ETA is sourced, they don't have to pay as much as tax. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just freestyling here, but I'm just trying to find the rationale why some of these brands are
Yeah.
still able to source ETAs.
And then Tennessee Mike saying doesn't ETA stop providing I thought Habring was all in house, weren't they?
That's what I thought.
I could have sworn
But
I thought that
they're all
Habring was in house.
they
Didn't
definitely have an in-house.
wasn't his chrono like based off of a 7750 at first? I mean, I could be totally wrong.
It may have been.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm looking it up now. Habring, it was based on the ETA Valjoux 7750, and then after the withdrawal by ETA in 2011 to safeguard their own production, they created an equivalent replacement.
No.
Yeah.
So I wonder what that means, though. Now I wonder what that means. Like, does that mean like a whole from the ground floor up movement? Or did they take something else and heavily modify it?
Because that's what a lot
They're
of companies I noticed do. I'll go ahead, Amin.
they're very explicit about it on their website.
Okay.
So they made their own escapement, balance wheel, hairspring, the entire wheel work, winding mechanism. I don't know. They go into detail it, but it definitely sounds like they made their own.
Okay.
Legitimate
Nice.
movement.
But what I was gonna say is a lot of companies will put their name on the actual movement. Like Hamilton, for instance, will say the H50 or whatever, when it's really a lot of people that don't know, they think they're just looking at like a Hamilton in-house movement.
Yeah. So that's why like a
Instead
website
of, what I'm saying?
like a website like Watchbase is often a good source. Now they don't have every single movement by every single brand, and their names, but a lot of them, like about a good 70% of the time I go there looking up something, I can find it there, and they will tell you if it's a movement that has a brand, they've altered the name to it, they call it their own. They will tell you what base it is. So there's ways to find these things out. It's like I said, Watchbase, you're not going to always get the answer there, but most of the time you'll find the answer.
Nice.
So,
and then Design
Chris,
Atelier is saying kind of like, what's up?
so Rob basically, hasn't bought a Selita and is, has a, lesser feeling for it. And I kind of don't care. Where do you fall there? Like if you hear a watch
Like I
has a
said, I'm
Selita,
more kind of neutral.
pretty neutral.
Like
It doesn't.
I feel like I am kind of
put you
like
off.
I think like if it's either or, like if I have the choice, I think I'll probably pick ETA over Selita. But if it has just the Selita, like it doesn't really stop me from buying the actual watch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
it's less
kind of
of a,
neutral on that. Like I don't like one or the other.
I mean, it's certainly less of a deal breaker for me than it
Yeah,
was maybe 6 months ago.
Mm.
You know,
How about the chat? There are those of you watching right now. Would you buy a watch with a Selita movement, or is that a no-go for you?
Yeah, is that a deal breaker? Now, I remember watching. I don't know if you remember watching Mark Goldberg stream with Jeff McMahon. Like I wondered, like a lot of the things in the watch community, like he brought up a good point. He's like, is it heads that we think one is better than the other just because that's what the whole group thinks? Which I think makes sense. I mean, that's kind of logical thinking. I think personally go on hating or bashing one certain thing, and then everybody kind of follows suit.
I mean, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, in my end, but I mean, I think so. This is how sick I am. So I feel like there's some truth to the group think, and then I have found evidence to back up my thinking with that. You know what I mean? You know, and but I'm coming around because I realize that like my first thoughts are not always the correct thoughts, right? So like and I have guys like you to bounce off ideas from, and there's plenty of information out there. So I would never say that I would not buy a watch that has a Selita on it. I just prefer now. I mean, prefer if it has an ETA. If it's between two watches and they're both very similar and they appeal to me both equally, and if one has an ETA, one has a Selita, I'm going to pick the ETA now. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to change my mind 6 months from now or from a year from now. I really I'm a Zin fanboy. Like I said earlier, I would buy the 104 even though it has a SW200 in it. I just don't have it. It just doesn't make sense in my collection right now. Maybe a year ago would have. And when I was thinking about buying it a year ago, I got to be honest with you. I just told you that I have a bias towards ETA, and I was more hardened in that bias about a year ago. But I would have still bought the 104 last year. You know what I mean? So I'm full of. I'm a big hypocrite when it comes to a lot of things, especially when it comes to watches.
I hear you. I know we can all be picking our own way.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, the 104. Go ahead,
but it's such a less of a deciding factor than it used to be. I could be honestly, I mean, like I said, it's not a deal breaker anymore for me as much.
Yeah, I used to be in the ETA camp where I would only buy it if it were ETA, but then like I said, I started hearing more, which is with the Selita movement that were modified. If it's modified and regulated by the company decently, and I movement at all, like comparable to the ETA movement.
I think Nick J makes a good point that when a company like IWC uses Selita movements, it's it speaks for them too. It raises them up somewhat.
Definitely.
Just like when
definitely.
It does, but does it lower IWC?
Maybe, but just like Tudor using ETA or Omega using ETA, I think that IWC has enough cachet brand history that even if it lowers them a little, they're pretty solid. They're made.
Yeah. That could also be one argument too, as to like the price of IWC, as why they charge kind of almost in-house prices for having an aftermarket movement too. Like you would think they would lower the prices just a little. That's just personal opinion, which is subjective. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's one of my remaining gripes about Selita is that if it is true that it is less to make, you know, why aren't these brands giving us a break? I mean, I know why they're not, and it's not on Selita, but in a way, by default, I associate that with them. But I mean, you're never going to see in
Yeah.
anything prices go down. Oh, prices always go up. Um, but it just makes me rethink. Then
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, well, if I have a choice between ETA and Selita, maybe I still go with ETA.
Yeah,
What's
like
the cost?
like brands like IWC, you're basically paying for their marketing. Really.
Right.
I just wonder how much that difference in cost, what percentage of the cost of the watch is it, right? Because most of the cost of the watch is not what it costs to be built, right?
Mhm.
Most of it's far exceeds the cost that it was to make it, right? For all these companies.
Just like
So
IWC, they got to pay Brady, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's you're right, Amin. I mean, like, are we talking like a difference of like $1,
or
right?
even if it's $200 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Is that going to affect the price of a $8,000 watch, or or should that be passed on in an $8,000 watch to bring it down by $200? I'm just asking.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, probably not. But I mean, I'm not saying that my argument or my thinking is bulletproof. I mean, there's definitely holes to it, and it's because of the natural bias that I have. But I think, I think with something with like an IWC, it is a little bit disappointing that they're trying to pass off a movement that's on that's their own, right? They try to they give it a name. They don't really tell you what it is. You have to go do some research to find out. And not only is it not an ETA, but it is a Selita, which doesn't have as long as of a history as ETA does, or reputation as ETA does. So, and look, we might be talking in an $8,000 watch, a fraction of the cost if we're talking $200. But it just goes to speak about what that brand is doing, trying to pass off something like this on you, while still hitting you for $8,000, which is a ridiculous amount for anybody to spend on anything, other than like a car, or you know what I mean, so
Or down payment on a house.
yeah.
But actually, Design Atelier actually brought up an interesting point earlier about Seiko. Look at Seiko and Orient, companies like that. They can do in-house movements and keep costs. Like you can get an Orient with an in-house movement. I got that little TriStar for under $100, and it's all in-house, everything. So I mean, that's you know. And then WV David R brought up a good point too. He said, has anybody actually compared them side by side? The two actual movements.
I've seen some.
Have you guys seen anybody do that?
Pictures side by side?
Yeah, I've seen some, like Amin said. I mean, I've seen some high res.
Okay.
They look.
Is there any real difference that you guys notice?
I mean, I'm not a trained eye for that, so
yeah, they look comparable.
Yeah,
it's not an obvious difference.
Okay, and then Winding Watches is saying that Tim also wanted that Omega makes Speedmasters for less than 10% of their MSRP. So that's another example. They just price hike it.
I just assume that most of these watches cost way less to make than they're selling them for. What am I describing?
Yep. Indites?
I
never heard that.
Indicts, like indicting?
I'm incriminating people?
That's what I was thinking.
Oh.
I'm describing Invicta.
Oh,
I think we had a spell check.
Invicta.
Oh,
okay, yeah.
Got it. I thought I was incriminating someone here without knowing it.
Design you have
No.
design you have a proper spell checking system.
I have for you just asked about my green screen. I've got one bright light coming at me this way, one bright light coming at me that way, so that the screen behind me doesn't have shadows on it for that reason. And then the software we're using, this StreamYard, does the rest. So here I'll just show you my green screen. That's what I look like. That's what it actually looks like. Yeah, I mean, Ariel Adams had, from A Blog to Watch, had a really interesting article about how we all want in-house movements and how that's driven the price of everything we want much higher. You know, that just much higher. And I guess the companies that have gotten much higher while still delivering the off-the-shelf movements, I can see how that's kind of you know, a letdown.
And then Wanting Watches said if you have volume in-house, doesn't really add as much cost since it's spread across huge sales. That's true.
Especially if you've been doing it forever,
much,
right? Like Seiko movements have just been very slowly iterated over the decades that they've been doing them. I'm going to go into the Archie luxury studio here.
For Clive. Clive would like that.
Clive, I'm in Archie's office.
Life is hard. And then Design Atelier is saying if you have a large enough production, like CNC machines like Seiko, their in-house is cheap. Everybody else's in-house is mostly for craftsmanship. True too, and I think some other people have said before that you're paying for like a lot of the research, and again, like I was saying before, going to marketing and all that. Like with a lot of the micro brands, they just kind of buy either or movement, and they just kind of throw it in or movement they have. And then Seiko is equal to. I would agree with that. Seiko is pretty reliable. They'll last for years. Like that, the Monster I have, I've had that going on 8 or 9 years now, and it's still beating.
Don't have to do a lot of maintenance to it, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And Wanting Watches the same look for Carpet Beetles.
You know, it's funny when Amin was mentioning or someone had mentioned about in-house movements, and everybody wants in-house movements until they have to get it serviced, right? So there is a lot of value to having, at least in my mind, in my collection, having a good amount of like ETAs or let's say Selitas in it, because there's still a lot of great watches that have those movements. And as everyone says, you can take it to a local good watchmaker if you want it serviced. Not so much if you have a Gerard Perregaux movement on your Seahawk and you have to send it, like me, to Switzerland to get it serviced, and that's and I got lucky and it was just under $1,000. So you're not gonna
like
pay
Archie
that much
says,
for
it's not worth it unless it hurts, right?
Yeah.
It's and some in-house movements are potentially a local person who's really good, not under warranty, but could service it, and others are designed almost to prevent that, right? Either intentionally or unintentionally are designed in a way to prevent that.
Yeah.
So amongst the ones which are in-house, it's still nice to have one that, like, can be opened using regular tools and so forth. But
now, do you guys know the actual servicing cost? I've actually never really sent one to get serviced yet, but do you know the cost of ETA, like repair over Selita? Do you guys know?
Overreach? No, I do not know. I would imagine
I heard
it's in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I heard ETA's around $300-400. I don't know if that's true or not to get an ETA service.
I mean, I mean, that's a figure I've seen thrown around online. I've never had to have. Look, I have
Mm.
I have an ETA. I have a 6498 in a 6497 in my Panerai, right? And that's from 2005, and I've yet to. I bought it in 2005, 2006, and I've yet to have it serviced, and it keeps great time.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Clyde
if
might
that would.
maybe Clyde will chime in the comments. Yeah. That's one thing I was wondering if you guys design until they saying 200 to 500, probably depending on the amount of damage and everything you have on yours.
Mhm.
You know, whichever one the person sends in, like there's probably like water in it, whatever, you know, stuff like that. And then Bruce is saying at a 2824 is around $350. So that's not too
Yeah.
bad. No.
And I would imagine if you have a 6497, 6998, it might be less than that because you don't. It's not an automatic, right? So in theory, it should be less. And most of these watchmakers, or if not all of them, that's part of how they learn how to do watchmaking is they learn on one of those. So you could probably take that around
Yeah.
town and just. That's just my. I mean, I've never had to have one service, but that's my guess.
Yeah, like I said, I've never sent one in for service myself, but I feel like that's not that bad of a price. Now the Zenith, when I sold it, of course, but I wouldn't even want to know what the cost on the Zenith
Oh yeah.
would have been this service.
Yeah.
Probably
The
at
only-
least what, $2,000? Would you guess?
Who knows?
I don't know.
What's up, man?
Over a G.
The only I've only two services I really done. I did a Rolex service that was I think something like 700, and I did a Panerai service. I can't remember the price, but that was an ETA movement. But Panerai, charges more, and they replace some things besides doing the movement.
And then Winding Watches is saying ETA or Selita, just get it serviced local. Sadly, I've found here each, but I don't think we have a watchmaker here. But I've heard, what is it, TikToking, I think is a good one to send them to here in the U.S. Is what I've heard.
And you could maybe Federico's guy, Hansi. I mean, I don't know.
There are a bunch online.
Yeah, there are a bunch online too.
That you can do. Bunch
Yeah.
online.
Just looking through the chat here. Let's see here. It says WB. What's up?
Colin Winding Watches said somewhere in here, what's this service thing people talk about? Flip that thing before it needs service. And that's kind of my mentality too. Not necessarily flip the thing before it needs service, but I try to pretend that service thing is not going to be necessary when I'm thinking about watches, which is not wise, but it is. It's my approach.
Man, it says these WV David R is saying this service costs make a good argument for quartz. He's still buying mostly quartz, and there's nothing wrong with quartz. I like a decent little grab and go watch, like that little Frag. I'm selling it right now, but they're really good grab and go watch for what they are.
Yeah, I mean that's
and then
makes a good argument to have like just a G-Shock in your collection too every once in a while. I mean, just have something that like a $40 G-Shock that you can throw away if anything happens, and just buy another one.
And
or change the battery.
Sometimes it's cheaper to buy a new movement or even a watch that has the same movement.
Yeah. And then do a switch.
Do a switch. Yeah. Like NH35s are inexpensive. You can, if you bust one of those, it's cheaper to swap the movement out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had actually emailed Del Rey about my, which I know people think is retarded probably because it's such a cheap watch, but my orange monster, he told me, he's like, yeah, you're better off just to, just order the NH35 or something like that off of eBay and throw it in there.
Yeah.
Rather than getting it served. Just because, sentimental value, that's one that I'll know. It's like my first real watch, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Also, I think if you had it serviced or replaced, some places are going to be much cheaper than Del Rey for service.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think their lowest prices are going to still be pretty significant compared to some people who do that sort of thing.
And I
Um,
think that's fine. Look, I mean, like switching the movements out for like an NH35 is fine, but when we're talking about some, I mean, maybe not. Well, let me rephrase this. If you have something that is very nicely decorated, right? Like if you have a nicely decorated 7750, you're just not gonna get a stock 7750 and put it in there. That's
right.
something where you kind of have to just bite the bullet and get that service,
Mm.
because there's plenty of. I mean, you can.
And then, go ahead, Bobby.
No, that's okay, Chris.
Oh no, I was just gonna read Colin's comment.
Yeah.
He said the NH35 cost is limit. Yeah,
Oh, they have the stem. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. That's true.
But we're getting closing in on an hour here, guys. You want to call it a night unless anybody in the chat's got any questions to add to it.
I just
And then
just
Rick
have
is saying
one.
his.
Oh, go ahead.
What's up? Man?
No,
No, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just reading Rick's comment.
Yeah.
He said his Paddock 5524 travel time is in service for $1,600 in 38 weeks. Quoted 38 weeks. That's a
38
long,
weeks.
long time to wait to get a watch back. Ooh. But what were you saying, Amin?
Oh, I was just gonna say I have a vintage Whitnauer chronograph. It was from I think I want to say 1950s maybe,
Okay.
and it needed a service, and I was going to sell it, and the quotes that I got ranged from $175 to over $1,000 to service it, all from recommended online places, and I was just, can I share my screen one more time here real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you click on that.
All right. Add to stream. I
So,
think I'm technology illiterate, guys.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So-
So this website, I had gotten a couple um, uh, recommendations about this website. This guy serviced my vintage Whitnauer 2-register chronograph for $175, and did a fantastic job. Totally turned it around in a couple of weeks. Did an amazing job. And I've asked him if he'll do Seikos and that sort of thing, and he said yes. So I just think that as an aside, the place that you go with can some of the more popular places that do those kinds of watches were quoting me 800,000, that sort of thing.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Which was way more than I paid
guess
for
we'll
the
go ahead
watch.
and call it a night, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Since
Yeah,
we're
sounds
moving
good,
on an
Chris.
hour here.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having us,
I
man.
appreciate everybody. Yes, sir. Thanks, guys. I appreciate everybody for chiming in on the comments, guys. We'll definitely have to do this again next time. I was thinking maybe do NH movement versus Muta movement talk next.
Wow.
So,
All right.
on the more affordable
Have a good
end.
Right, right.
Thanks, Chris.
Later, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Yes, sir.
Good night.
Yes, sir. Let's see. It should be in. That should be ended, I think. Are we on? I think we're.